So today we're going to talk about achieving a credit score of at least 800. And you may think right now with your credit score significantly less that achieving 800 is damn near impossible. But it's not. As an owner operator, you're going to have good cash flow. And what's going to be different for you rather than being an employee is you're going to have ability to do things. You're going to have ability to save money for truck repairs, first of all, which you should do. You should get that money set aside for truck repairs somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000. But I would say within the first 5 years, you need to repair and improve your credit score. So let's talk about the history of the credit score and what this means. So if you have a missed payment on your credit report, it will stay on there for 7 years. If you have a bankruptcy on your credit report, it will stay on there for 7 years. So what's the significance of 7 years? And I did a little bit of research actually. This goes back to biblical times and like Old Testament times. And there's a reference there. 7 years is very important in the Old Testament, and there's some significance in the New Testament as well. But we live in a Judeo-Christian civilization, Western civilization. So when America was colonized, for example, people couldn't afford to pay for the trip to come across the ocean. But so what they would do is they would become indentured servants. So when you think about the early colonial period of the United States, a lot of people came over uh, to the New World as indentured servants, and they had to work 7 years to pay off that debt. So there is a cultural and historical importance associated with 7 years. So when you have your things on your credit report and it is referencing missed payments or bankruptcy or anything like that, it's typically 7 years because it's been established in Western civilization for thousands of years. So that's interesting to know. So how do you get from a credit score that's below 700 to a credit score that's above 800? And I think you could do this in less than 7 years. Um, it shouldn't take you a full 7 years as an owner operator. It might under some circumstances, but I think you can do it in 5 years. And let me give you a couple examples. Let's say, for example, you have a missed payment and you have a loan. And it's like, now that you've been a truck driver or you're becoming an owner operator, you are able to make your payments on time, but your credit score is still going to reflect that missed payment. It's like, well, how do you fix that? Because it's like that's been on there for so long. Um, my best recommendation for that situation is pay off that loan and close the account. That missed payment will show on your credit report as long as that account is open. So let's say it's a $10,000 balance on that account, but you had a missed payment on there from 3 or 4 years ago. If you pay that account off, you'll close that account. It'll show paid in full, uh, you know, paid in full and paid as agreed, or something like that. And that missed payment will go away. So I think that's the number one reason people have a lower score is because of missed payments. Now there are, these credit repair companies out there. You see them advertised all the time. They're like, call us and we'll help you repair your credit. And basically what they do is, they call your lender and ask them to remove any negative reports. So if you had a missed payment, like let's say you had a credit union, for example, you had a loan through a credit union, and it was missed payment. The credit repair agency would call your credit union and ask them to remove that negative report. But you could do the same thing on your own. You don't have to pay someone to do that. So, but generally speaking, the best way to remove missed payments is to pay off that loan or credit card and you close it. That will do the trick. So other things that will help improve your credit score to get you up to 800 is you need to get out of debt. I think that's very important for a small business owner. If you're carrying a lot of debt, that's going to be a problem. Now, some people believe there's good debt and there's bad debt. And it's like, well, my mortgage on my house, that's good debt. And generally speaking, that's true. Reporting agencies look favorably on loans, which would be your home payment, your house payment. As long as there's not any missed payments, that's fine. If there's missed payments and you don't want to sell your house and you can't pay off your loan, that might stay on there for a full 7 years. That's the deal. So, but other debt would be considered consumer debt. So you have installment loans for things like your house or a car. Maybe you could pay the car off, but you probably couldn't pay your house off. It's awful hard to pay off $100,000 for a house. Not not totally impossible, but difficult. But you could pay off a $20,000 car loan, sure. You know, um, so you have what's called consumer loans. Consumer loans would be things like your car or a personal loan. That would be a consumer loan. Um, Consumer debt would be credit card debt. So these tend to be smaller in nature, and you should be able to pay them off. Honestly, within 5 years, you get rid of all your consumer debt. Because there's no excuse for carrying on with that debt. Because you'll have good cash flow. When I say good cash flow, you gotta remember you're being paid as an independent contractor. So your gross revenue per year probably $200,000 or more. Your net income could be 100,000 if you have a good year. So there's no excuse to not pay these things off. And as you pay these consumer loans off, your credit score will improve. And there's advantages to paying things off. Now, one of the factors that go into credit is the payment history. So some of your accounts, like maybe a student loan, for example, you might have had a student loan for 20 years. Well, that's a very long payment history. That will help improve your credit score. But let's just say you want to pay it off, which is noble. I think that's great. I paid mine off. It was great. So I felt so much better once I got rid of that stupid student loan. So, but it did affect my credit score because I had the student loan for so long. I had excellent payment history. Then when you close that account, that can shorten your payment history, because the payment history looks at open accounts. So that's something to keep in mind. But it just takes time to build credit. You gotta make payments. If you had missed payments and you start making all your payments on time, it may take 5 years for that payment history to correct itself. And you got to close those accounts that show missed payments. So there's great tools available to everyone that are relatively new. Credit Karma is excellent. I highly recommend them. Lifelock is good. Experian is good. Tansunion has their thing. So there's three major credit reporting agency: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. I prefer Experian because I pay a monthly subscription like $27 a month, but I can access my FICO score every day. I can lock freeze that account, and I can get a 3-in-1 credit report monthly. So that's a pretty good deal, and that gives me $1 million identity theft protection, which is really, really good. LifeLock is comparable. LifeLock's not bad. I've had LifeLock before, and then I switched to Experian. But if you really want to improve your credit, you got to know what's going on. You got to be able to get access to those credit reports. Now, I'll share a story about ancient times, before the internet. And I think we should call this BI before the internet. Like you had BC and then AC. I think we need to do BI before the internet. You know, this life was a little more challenging before the internet. If you wanted to know what your credit score was, you probably didn't know. Most people didn't know their credit score. I know it seems strange now because it's at your fingertips, but we didn't have smartphones back in the day. We didn't have the internet either. And if you wanted a copy of your credit report, you had to write a letter to the credit reporting agency, send it in the mail, wait 30 days, and they will mail you a copy of your credit report. That, nowadays you have an app on your phone. Every bank is offering you a free, your free score information, FICO information. You have, Experian, Tansunion, Equifax, all apps on your phone. You have Lifelock, on your phone. You can get all that information at the tip, with your finger, just a tip of your finger, and have it instantly. So what used to be something rare, nobody really knew what their credit score was. What would happen is you would apply for a loan, and the bank would tell you you're approved or not approved based on your credit, and you're like, oh, okay, well, what is my credit? And they're like, well, you have to mail in for a copy, get a copy. They wouldn't give it to you. So you're like, oh, okay, I think my credit's good, but I really don't know. So now so it's never been easier to know what your credit score is and to maintain it, and there's thousands of videos out there on how to improve your credit score. But let's talk about the advantages of having a credit score over 800. What's that do for an owner operator? Well, you never get denied for anything. Anytime you want to apply for a credit card or a personal loan or a truck loan, you're going to get approved. 800 is very rare. Not too many people achieve 800 credit score. So it's good for business, and you'll get the best rates. The banks and the financial institutions will be like, well, since you have such a great credit score, we will offer you a lower interest rate on your loan. The lower your credit score often means you'll pay a higher interest rate. So there is a cost benefit, associated with having a higher credit score. The higher credit score you have, the more money you'll save. Insurance companies, if you're like auto insurance, it's like they often look at your credit score, determine what your insurance rates will be. Landlords will pull your credit score to look at, your ability to make monthly rent payments. So things like that. Um, there is a thing called business credit, and you can get a copy of that from Experian as well. I'll see if I can find some links. I'll put it in the description when we're done. Not too critical for owner operators to know what their business credit score is. It's something that you want to be aware of, but it's different. It's a different type of report than your personal credit. Sometimes if you're a small business owner and say you were in retail and you were buying, tens of thousands of product at wholesale, and you may have to take out a loan to do that, a business loan to do that. Oftentimes they'll pull your business credit report to make sure that, you know, you have good credit before you can get that loan. Not necessarily applicable to owner operators because we're not in retail, so the loans that we face are truck loans and maybe overhaul loans or something like that, or an APU loan, but they're more likely to be looking at your personal credit, not your business credit. So credit is a very interesting thing. It's something that you should be able to achieve. Like I said, within 5 years, you should be able to get your credit score up to 800 and maintain it. At 10 years of being an owner operator, it'll be very smooth sailing. I mean, I've had a credit score over 800 for the last several years. I don't even think about it anymore. It's like, oh, of course my credit's over 800. It should be. I worked hard to get it there, and then you got to maintain it. So it's achievable, and you should do it. You should not settle for a mediocre credit score. But, generally speaking, a good credit score viewed by the banks would be anything 750 or above. But why settle for the average? Why settle for good when you can reach excellent? That's my point of view. It's like, why would I want to sell at 750? Let's go for it. Let's get 800 or above. And you'll be an elite company once you do that. All right, guys. That's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.